And humans are actually, we're wild. We're better at alignment than any other species on the planet. In fact, I would argue that our capacity for alignment, more than our capacity for intelligence or almost anything else, is what sets us apart. Corporations are cancer. The hippies are right. What is a cancer? A cancer is a cell. It's an organism that has to take care of itself, that the system won't look out for it, and that it is effectively alone, and it must grow forever and build its own safety. It's literally what corporations do. They don't have a somatic form. At no point do they finish development. Training on morality is a bad idea. Ethics professors who study ethics are not more ethical. Ethics is learned by observing the truth. The truth is that acting like a dick to the people around you is not good for you.
All right, so thank you all for coming. Super stoked to have this conversation. I'm joined by Emmett Shear. Emmett, I mean, your CV is absurd. You founded Twitch, Justin TV. You were CEO of OpenAI for a very brief moment. And now you are the CEO and founder of an organization called Softmax, which, as I understand it, is trying to solve AI alignment through a very novel approach you call organic alignment. So to get us started, explain sort of what organic alignment is and why you think that is what we need to be doing.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. When I first started looking for work in AI was after I retired from Twitch, and I started this idea that I was going to take it easy and do some individual research into AI, and started trying to learn how everything works because it was obviously sort of the interesting thing I'd wanted to work on. That was actually very nice. I really enjoyed that brief, 7-month period of my life. And then the OpenAI thing happened. And I never had the experience of receiving a sign before. The universe is like, hello, you, specifically you're supposed to be doing knock, knock. Because being in the middle of that, it just became very obvious that the people involved at all levels and all sides weren't concerned with the aspects of it that concerned me. Which isn't to say they were dumb or they weren't thinking about it. They just the questions they were interested in, the way they were thinking about it, I was like, oh, it's really obvious. Just I've now seen at the very highest levels and sort of through the company and talking to all these people that there's this whole giant swath of things that I thought were important that I kind of knew no one was working on. But you think that they must have a secret project where they're working on it, and then there's no secret project where they're working on it, and you're like, oh, I see. Okay, well, if I don't do this, then there's not anything that's going to happen. And so I started looking for how do I help for this problem. And the problem sort of at a really high level is we're going to make these AI systems that are going to be very powerful. And you make a very powerful thing, it will get used to do stuff. And if that stuff is things that are good, then that's good. And if it's bad, it's bad. And someone should do something about that. Someone should have a real plan, not kind of one of those we'll kind of go by intuition and gut kind of plans, but a plan where you could measure your progress against it. And if you wanted to go to Mars, you would build a sequence of rockets that got bigger and bigger until you finally made the Mars side rocket. And so I really started working on the question, what would it mean for an AI to be aligned? Which was talking about something being aligned. What does it mean for something to be aligned? Which felt more feasible than the question of what is goodness, which is the actual question you have to answer. So I told myself that I only had to figure out alignment. It turns out you actually have to solve morality more or less. Not solve morality in the sense of physics hasn't solved motion. We still have trouble making things move the way we like. But there's sort of this moment where you systematize your approach to motion. You have the idea of systematicity. And the challenge is to systematize our approach to morality, to systematize our approach to knowing the good, knowing the right way. Because if you can't be systematic about that, then when you build the really powerful thing, you'll point it at something. When you point it at the thing, you just kind of hope that it's good. And if it's not, everything goes bad. And so I started really seriously working on alignment. And what became clear is that what most people called alignment was alignment. It was what I would now call control alignment or steering alignment. You have some target you've picked out, which you've defined in some way, which can be defined as like, do whatever that guy says, or like follow this set of rules, or like follow this particular algorithm for determining the good, and then do whatever it said, do whatever this, you infer to be true given this set of rules. And the problem with control alignment is that people have been trying for a really, really long time to like get a stable, useful definition of the good that like always produces the right result. And it just doesn't seem to work that way. And it's pretty obvious that it doesn't work this way because the good itself isn't stable, because we aren't stable, because the world is non-stationary. Things keep changing. And whatever you wrote down before might have been if you're lucky, it was a great approximation then, and even a good enough approximation then, but it's not going to stay that way. And the problem is that the world changes in ways that your model can't anticipate and never does anticipate, which is why you have the saying, models always wrong, sometimes useful. Your model isn't reality. It's just like your best guess. And so it became clear we needed a different kind of alignment. And where I wound up going was to ask this question, okay, so if you're not doing control, if the goal is not a system of control, if the goal is not to enslave our future AI children, then, sorry, that's like, I can't help but put the jab in, but like if the goal was and yet to get along, like what would that look like? And the answer is like, well, we're doing it everywhere right now. Like humans are actually really good at this, and evolution is really good at this game. Multicellularity is alignment. It's a bunch of cells that all have their own individual goals, and yet here you are, one mostly coherent person made out of 28 trillion parts, and somehow all of their individual goals, like I don't experience the world like I'm made of 28 trillion parts. I experience it like I'm, not entirely, you have like parts inside of you a little bit, but like not like 28 trillion of them, like far fewer than 28 trillion. And you experience this going up too, because like when you're on a team, really tight-knit team, you can feel like there's like a thing going on where you're there, you can ask yourself in any moment on a team, like, what do we want and what do I want? And you get different answers. And you know what the we wants. You're very aware of it. Who's the we? Where is this knowledge coming from? Well, it's an inference you're making about this collective, which has goals, which is not different than the inference you make about another human. Like, you don't see inside someone else to know what they want. You just watch their behavior and you infer, given that behavior, I infer they have these goals. Well, given the collective's behavior, I infer it has these goals. And that's organic alignment. Organic alignment is this process by which it seems possible that a bunch of agents that interact with each other eventually wind up in kind of like an orbit around each other. Like their beliefs form an orbit where my beliefs influence your beliefs, influence my beliefs, and we find ourselves in homeostasis, where we are stably in interaction with each other over and over again. And when that happens, you get to make this inference. There's an object we're in orbit around. There must be some principle here. So there's some shared thing. There has to be, right? There's almost definitionally, there's some statistical invariant that's being maintained that's causing this. And that's the we. And what you realize is that you are utterly dependent on the we. You're born into a family. Agents don't come from nowhere. There's never been an agent in the history of the universe where you look backwards and it was ex nihilo. This agent just appeared out of nowhere. It has no purpose. No, you were made by something that had a goal in mind for making you. It wanted to perpetuate itself. It wanted to have a robot servant to go do things. Like you were made for a reason. You may not know what that reason is, but you have a purpose. There is a teleological nature to existence for all agents, because they don't just pop out of nowhere. They always come out of other agents. And agents, what makes you an agent is that you have goal-oriented behavior. So since you're a result of agent behavior, you're a result of goal-oriented behavior. And when you see this, it's like, oh, okay, well, that's the thing we're trying to learn. We're trying to learn, what does it mean to be a family? What does it mean to be a we? What does it mean to be a society? And that trick, can you get the thing to be part of a society, part of a team in a stable way, that's the core of it. That's the heart of organic alignment.
So it sounds like you're referencing nature heavily. You see nature as a thing that, and I would agree, like the cells in our bodies, all my stomach cells, they're working together very well to do the job of my stomach. And that seems, though, like a fairly to me, like I wouldn't expect my cells to have almost individual identities, right? Because they actually share the identical genetic code or nearly identical genetic code. So if you're talking about a group of agents that are, digital agents that have their own separate identities, how would that same kind of like emergent coordination happen between them if they're not, if they don't share that same genetic code with one another?
I have a couple sort of answers to this. One's the cheeky answer, which is like exactly how much difference, how much difference is required before it's no longer possible to form a collective agent. Like if you one more gene change, now it becomes impossible. Like when you start to look at it, you realize there can't be a hard boundary. It's always going to be contextual. But I think deeper than that, you already know organic alignment. You do it every day. You form organic alignment with other humans around you. And humans we're wild. We're better at alignment than any other species on the planet. In fact, I would argue that alignment, our capacity for alignment, more than our capacity for intelligence or almost anything else, is what sets us apart. Because human beings almost killed the whales because of our capacity for alignment, to organize ourselves into hunting parties and have whole chains of supply chains building ships. These are all alignment problems. But then we looked at the whales and we said, no, actually, you're on my team. You are me. We're not that different. You're part of the mammal team. We're part of the mammal team with you. And we prefer that you don't die. We prefer that we see you as part of us enough that you're not just dead matter to us. We would be sad. Not like so sad that like we would like, do that much, but we'd be sad. And so we will deliberately like take extra action, do extra work to stop other people from hunting you and be, pretty reasonably, some small number of us will actually be pretty reasonably upset about it. Other species do not do this. They don't, not that they are necessarily cruel to things around them. They wouldn't get organized to go save another species because they recognize their fundamentally shared nature. Like other species don't start veganism movements inside of it. It's not a thing that exists in other species. Whether the vegans are right or wrong, it's demonstrate this deep human capacity to see that we are part of this larger thing. And you have this whole moral progress, the arc of moral progress becomes really obviously true, actually. There is moral progress. It's like, how big of a scale can you align on effectively? Like how big of a group can you get working in a coherent way that serves in the flourishing of the members? That's basically your cap on alignment. Like that's how we measure it for the agents. Like how many agents can we get to be in a single attractor together? And so yeah, there's moral progress, whether you want to call it moral or not. Alignment progress is the ability to see the way that actually all humans are your ally, or could be, if you were better at organizing. They have the potential to be your ally. That's just true. They do. Someone who doesn't believe that is just incorrect about the world. Now, whether the capacity and actualization are different, just because someone has the capacity to be your ally, and it's important to see that, doesn't mean that like they are your ally. I think that some people lose track of this thing. A lot of people who are more universalist, I think, have a tendency to confuse the capacity with the realization. But your cells do it at this very like self-sacrificing level, because your cells are mostly clones of each other, and their reproductive cycle goes through themselves. Like ants. Ants are like this. Ants don't have a separate identity from the other ants. The ant colony is the thing with the identity. Humans, I love us, are not like that. We are not ants.
We're groups of monkeys that functionally behave like ants,
yeah,
on the scale of ants.
Yeah, you could imagine a future of humanity where we turn ourselves into ants. We could do that, where there becomes a central reproductive function that decides what new things get made, and it just prints copies of those people over and over again to fill various roles. And it is a singular gradient descent search to improvement on humanity rather than an open-ended one.
It's literally the thesis of Brave New World.
Yeah. And I think that Brave New World actually kind of demonstrates why that society were it to have to compete with a more open society would find itself at a grave disadvantage, because of the very thing that makes morality hard, that makes alignment hard. Your model of what good people are, your model of what skill is, your model of whatever it is, you pick something, you're not right. There's something about the world, you're going to find out that you've put yourself into a cul-de-sac and your model is wrong, and you're going to lack the diversity in the population to figure it out. Like if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, you do not want a highly clonal population. It's like very dangerous. You're the cheetahs. You're very fast. You're overfit. You've overfit this circumstance, and being overfit means you will outperform when the environment's stable, and underperform when the environment is moving in a more ambiguous world. And like the thing about building more humans and like having more technology is like we just dump entropy into the environment just constantly. The world just gets weirder and harder, and like it's just this never-ending like. And the instant we get good at handling that level of entropy, we level up and we start dumping more entropy into the environment, making it weirder and harder. It's like this endless cycle. And so like your beautifully designed fixed society where you figured out exactly the right kind of people to make and your model for how to adapt those people when this kind of change happens and that kind of change happens is just going to get hit in the face by some kind of change you didn't expect. And oops. That's why you like the open societies are better.
Okay, so coming back to how you would imbue these principles into AI. Mm-hmm. What methods? Because I know you've been only running for a year or so, and this is early days, you're still in the research phase. But like, what are some of the promising techniques that you're exploring?
I think we have a map now, more or less. Like, we know like we have to go to like that mountain peak and that mountain peak, not like how we get there, but like.
So like, give me an example.
So there's the fact of alignment, and then there's like reflective alignment. Just like cells do differentiate, but cells don't tell themselves stories about how they're differentiating. They don't decide I'm going to be a blacksmith because being a blacksmith is heroic or whatever. They just differentiate into a liver cell. They read signals, they do it. Their self model, they have a model of self, but not a model of themselves as thinking selves, right? They don't have multiple. It's like humans have this very stacked, many layers of reflection. The cells do not have this. I think there's a way in which you could say cells are. I think you get better predictive results if you assume that cells are aware, and just are very dumb. Just don't experience most of our experience, but they're aware. There's not a lot going on. That's not good enough. The problem is if you have something that is de facto aligned, cells are de facto aligned. When the system changes under variance and disturbance in the system, if they get knocked out of the attractor, they just get knocked out of the attractor. So the attractors aren't very strong. What's cool about humans is that we can anticipate the things that would cause us to become cancer. We can see if I go down this path, I offer you the vampire pill that makes you a vampire and gives you great power and joy, and you'll feel really good, but you're going to murder everyone you know and like torture them forever. You don't take the vampire pill because you don't want to become that. Even though like it might feel good, it's like you don't will that future.
But we still behave in this. I mean, you mentioned like acting cancerous. Everyone has different phrases for this. I call it like Molochian behaviors.
Yeah.
These like lose-losey type dynamics. But at the same time, we have all these tragedy of the commons.
You asked how you actually solve it, right? So, okay, sorry. Let me answer your question. Okay, so in order for me to be stably aligned with you, not just aligned with you de facto, I need a model of how my actions not only align or don't align to the current goals. I need a model of how my actions change my own learning trajectory and your learning trajectory, and how that will impact the attractor in the future, and whether or not this leads to the robust flourishing of the attractor or not. I need to understand the consequences of my actions for the collective dynamics themselves, which you do all the time. Like, I'm going to go out of my way to be nice to this team member because I know that like I need them to do this, and I can tell that I'm not articulating the vision, so this person's drifting, and like we constantly model how what we're doing impacts the groups we're in. Okay, so to do that, AI models have no sense of self today. Like, the problem with AI models is they're story simulators, but they can simulate any story. We kind of very mildly like condition them to tell certain stories over others, but they've just been conditioned to do that instead of this. They don't really have
memories.
Yeah, they don't really have memories, right?
Yeah,
you
they don't
are
have
your
a
memories.
consistent personality.
Yeah. And you are a set of habitual, not only memories, not just behaviors, but habitual ways of learning, habitual ways that you engage with the world in terms of how do you know how you handle this problem. You know how you learn this thing. You know in the situations you find yourselves in. And so that's got that, you've been continually learning on your own behavior for a long time, and that's yourself. And then over time, you form a model of yourself. You have a model of the kinds of things you do, and that model actually guides most of your behavior. There's this literal point in your brain where eventually the cortex basically starts stepping in instead of the hypothalamus and the basal ganglia, and like basically it starts driving because its predictive accuracy gets high enough that its guess as to what you'll do next based on the story it's telling itself is better than your intuitive feeling guide, which has a higher valence. Because you know that you've been down this path, and yeah, it feels a little higher valence right now, but we're just gonna go with the thing we know actually works. We've tested this out. We have enough predictive loss. It's not we know it's a regression to go in. And it's all about modeling yourself, because how can you possibly model a we and stably maintain a we if you don't even know what an I is? So step one is you have to get models that have a theory of mind for themselves, and then for others at the just base level of like, I can predict, I have a model of my thoughts and what kind of thoughts I have. And then you need a model of the dynamics of mind, which is sort of personality. Like you have what kind of thoughts you think is not static. There's like a model of it, but you also have a model of how that model changes, which is your personality. That's like you have your model of your thoughts. Your model of your thoughts is like, oh, I'm a person who gets mad easily, and I'm a person who does this, I'm a person who does that. But you also have a model that says, I'm the kind of person who used to be this kind of a person, and am now this kind of person. I will be the kind of person in the future. And you have to, that's like many layers of sort of self-reflective models and models of your models. It takes a lot of training and very specific learning circumstances to induce this. If you take a human being, you take them out of a social context, and you raise them in the wild with no other humans, they do not develop these models properly. It's very damaging. Like this is not something you didn't just we are predisposed to develop this. We have the equipment, the capacity, the inductive bias. But if you take out away the learning scaffold, we don't. It's not in the architecture. It's in the architecture and the training data. And then you have to put them in a circumstance where not only do they exist and they have stable goal-oriented behavior that they can model, and then they have a good model of their own stable goal-oriented behavior and how their behavior changes, and then again for everyone else, that they can then also, having all those models, notice that there's a collective model that's made out of those models, and that collective model has its own goals and personality and is changing over time, and all of the causal connectivity between all those things. And the point you've done that, you have something that knows how to do alignment. Like that is what the skill of alignment is theory of mind for groups, right? And if you have theory of mind for groups, you can do alignment. It's the reason it doesn't happen automatically is it's fucking complicated. Like it's the hardest single intellectual challenge, I think, that like people are really hard. In groups of people, managing dynamic groups of people, leadership, it's one of the like single hardest things we do. The only thing that like maybe comes close is like abstract physics or math, right? Like in terms of challenge. And even that, I'd argue, I've done some amount of both. People are harder, man. Like we only think that math is hard because we haven't even tried to really solve people. So like math seems hard because you can actually, we know what the standard of really doing math is. We don't even know what actually being good at people would look like. That's never happened.
Well, and especially if, as you say, it's all like different individual frames, and it's essentially relative. Yep. It's always changing. It's always in flux.
Absolutely.
So I can conceptualize like the kind of environment you would be wanting to like build this collective of agents where they can start trying to get this emergent coordination. Is it games? Like what? Is there anyone doing this right now?
Well, we are.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, yes, someone's doing this. This is what we're doing. At the end of the day, it's a game. It's a virtual world where agents like take actions which have consequences, some of which are better or worse than each other. You can call them getting points or like reward, or whatever you want to call it. And then the ones that are better at the game get to differentially reproduce more, either through some sort of evolutionary approach or because the gradients of their trajectories get pushed into the model more. But like, there's no difference between reproducing by we make a copy of you versus reproducing because your trajectory, your behavior set gets saved. It's the same thing.
And what have you seen so far?
Oh man, it's so hard. We can't get them to do anything. Like that's I'm being unfair. we've discovered a lot of the principles required to stabilize individual behavior such that it would be possible to build a self model. And I think we are on the cusp of being able to get stage one of this plan done. We're about to have stably goal-oriented agents who are capable of modeling their own behavior when I say agents, I want to be clear, these are not LLMs. These are 20 million parameter like LSTM RNNs, like the dumbest, because the thing we're trying to learn here, it doesn't matter how good it is at anything in the abstract. It matters what properties make it stably goal-oriented or not. We are actually doing science, not engineering. Like when you're doing engineering, it's all about like you test things up to scale. When you're doing science, you want to isolate the things as much as you can. So we start with like the very smallest models that we can reasonably train to have the behaviors we want. And so, yeah.
Give me an example of like one of the goals.
So they're in this thing called metagrid, meta as in METTA, like heart meta, but also meta. And the metagrid is basically this big 2D grid world. And it has objects in it called converters. And the agents walk around and the converters produce, some of the converters just produce cards. Other converters turn sets of cards into other cards. And they walk around and they get cards. And then then they can like, if they want to, trade them with each other, although nobody's learned to trade yet. That doesn't actually happen. And then they put the cards into the other converters, and eventually one of those cards turns into hearts, and the heart cards, which are the meta, that's reward. And however many heart cards you have at the end, that's how much we reproduce. It's a really dumb game. But it doesn't matter because it's not about trying to solve a hard game. It's about trying to see, can we get them to have stably goal-oriented behavior, and can we get them to model themselves as such? And so we've made a lot of progress on like, what are the conditions and absence for when the behavior becomes stable? It's really easy to get an RL thing to learn something. It's really easy to get it to learn a specific thing. It's surprisingly hard to get it to act in a stably goal-oriented way when the goal is not always fixed. And so that's the thing I think we've made a good deal of progress on. And if you remember the previous thing, that's like step 1 of 15 or something. But like, I feel like it's usually the first steps are often some of the hardest. And also, ultimately, it just feels so good to have a plan. Oh my God, when I started like a year and a half ago, my plan was like wander around in the wilderness, looking at ideas until I found something that looked like it might be a plan by which I could like deterministically arrive at a thing that would be useful. Which it was, as far as I could tell, no one had such a plan. There wasn't such a plan. There might be more than one such a plan. I actually kind of think there is probably more than one possible plausible plan. I think actually like Fei-Fei Li's group, what's it called? But they're making the robots. What's it called? World Labs. Yeah, I think that's a plausible. Like,
what are they doing?
They're making robots and they're doing it from the outside. So we're starting with very, very simple things like the seed of a robot in a fake world and trying to grow it out to the point where it could actually run a robot. They're starting with an actual robot and trying to train it in the fullness of our reality, which is we considered that. I just think robots are really hard and expensive. Like they could be right. It's just like I'm not the guy for that one. So I'm glad somebody else is tackling that. I think it's like a good idea.
But they're taking the same bottom up approach.
They're taking the same fundamental insight that the robot needs to understand. Like the model has to have a model of itself and how this particular thing interacts with the world. Their intuition is it needs to be interacting with our world. Our intuition is that doesn't matter. It just needs to interact with a world. So it can be really cheap and fast and you can run billions of time steps per second on a single GPU tens of thousands of times per second on a single CPU, billions of time step training runs on a single CPU, instead of like having these super expensive robots that are hard to build and buggy. But on the downside, they get all the richness of the real world for free. We don't. I think my plan is correct, but their plan is like plausible. Most people's plans amount to like try to write down a definition of the good and then like make sure the thing follows the definition of the good, which I regard as a non-plausible plan that just cannot. Yes, all the major labs, everyone basically is trying to do anything that any control alignment comes down to. You have to define what the target is, and then you have to create a system of control that forces it into that valley. You might succeed at the system of control. That's like possible, but like the goal is bad. Like even if you succeeded at it, that can't be the right target. It never is. Yeah. I mean, I guess I can't rule out because Socrates is correct. The only thing I know is that I know nothing. So I can't rule out that this time you've just written down the definition of the good and you're right forever. Like, finally, we've done it. I guess it's possible. It just doesn't seem very plausible to me. Like, I really would find it very hard to buy that.
Are there any axioms that you think could, because presumably, even though you're creating these very hands-off environments that are very simple, there must be some, you're adding your own goals to it in some way.
Oh, yeah.
So you're still imbuing your own sort of philosophy into it, right?
There's this great MIT AI cone where I think it's Minsky is speaking to Susskind or something. And one of them's the novice, and I can't remember which one. But basically, the master comes in and asks the novice, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm training a randomly wired neural net to play tic-tac-toe." And he's saying, "Why is it randomly wired?" "I don't want it to have any preconceived biases about how to play." And at that moment, the master shut his eyes, and the novice said, "Why do you shut your eyes?" And the master said, "So that the room will be empty." And in that moment, the novice was enlightened, because truly, you are always giving the agent an inductive bias. Like, you picked an architecture and a loss, and you gave it a set of training data, and those are inductive biases. There's no like abstract, empty place to stand where it's like the perfectly unbiased model. Like, that's just nonsense. And so of course you're picking those things, and the only thing you have control over is how general and wide do you want them to be, and like what inductive biases do you want it to have. So actually, that's most of what we spend our time on. It may sound like we're putting nothing into this environment, such a dumb environment. Actually, it's just like every decision about everything about the environment, how they move, how the environment works, is chosen for an inductive bias for them to have stably goal-oriented behavior and be able to know themselves. Like, the way they move in the environment requires them to move in such a way that displays to them and to everyone around them where they intend to move next. That's less efficient. It makes it harder to learn, and it makes our training runs they're annoyingly bad at moving at first, because it's much easier to just give them the ability to just move one square in any direction whenever they want. That's like an easier way to do a movement. They'll learn it faster. It's much more flexible. But in that case, I can never tell, you have no body language. I don't know where you're going to move next. If I make you face the direction you need to move first, then part of understanding, predicting your own behavior and other agents' behavior is based on this observation about like what they're doing right now. And like, they could learn it anyway, but by making the environment induce that naturally, it has an inductive bias to just making it easier to model yourself in that way.
You mentioned the word efficiency. One of the arguments against this concept is one that we see, a lot of people believe, yes, the market is perfectly aligned with what humans want. I don't personally agree, because we're seeing, like, clearly there are market failures all over the place. Sometimes it does what we want, but actually a lot of the time it's sort of doing its own thing, right? And it's optimizing for efficiency as its primary goal.
It's not even doing its own thing. It's just doing a thing. The problem with the market isn't that the market is not awake. The market's not reflective. Like,
Right.
The market is like we are already part of a global superorganism. We call it the market. It makes things like iPads. We don't know how to make iPads. The market knows how to make iPads. We're cells in the market, and like, collectively we make the iPad, but like, truly we couldn't do the smallest part of global capitalism really ourselves. And this has always been true. It's just that capitalism was small before. It was like village size, and now it's globally, but it's still, and the problem is it has a model of the world outside, but the market does not have a model of itself, right? Because how would it? How does it observe itself? How does it observe its own behavior? And one of our challenges, actually one of the things I think about a lot, is like, what would it mean to take what we've learned, what it means for a learning system to model itself, and you allow the market to model itself. One thing we do know about modeling yourself is that it requires an other. You cannot get healthy egoic development. You cannot get even mild like comprehension of self without an other to reflect you back to you who is of the same kind. Because it has the way you learn yourself is you get mirrored, not necessarily literally, but there's a mirroring that happens with everyone around you in terms of how your behavior is in them and their behavior is in you. And you're building the model of them that you build, because you can see their behavior from the outside, helps you decode yourself. and is necessary. So I'm pretty sure the way you fix the market at the end of the day is to have more than, you have to actually divide it. We can't have one global market. You'd have to have a bunch of smaller markets that get to like observe each other. And then maybe the model, they'd have a hope of like waking up. And I have this idea that like, at some level, the problem is we all these people want to have like Gaia. Like Gaia is not really very good at her job right now. Like none of these,
define Gaia for those.
the one global mind. It's being one means it's undifferentiated. It's like a baby. It's a baby with no ability to separate itself from the world, just acting out of pure evolved, like this is what you do, no reflection. And the only way you're going to get that reflection is instead of trying to jump to, oh my God, we're all part of one global mind. Yeah, which I now believe, like they're right. All the hippies are right. We're part of this one global mind. There's like this global awareness that we are held within, and like our awareness it makes up. But like that global awareness is dumb, man. It's like not your friend. It's like barely knows what's going on. It's like it doesn't have. There's not much. It's like being worried about the global awareness of like a tree or a rock or something. It just doesn't have the ability to reflect very much. Its observation space is boring. And so our goal isn't a global mind. Our goal is like corporations or countries that are better run and that can observe each other and are more coherent in themselves, because they have the ability to be a society of minds, and you always have to have a society of minds if you want to work.
And factor in not only their own well-being, but the well-being of the whole ecosystem.
Well, or not. So actually one of the most important things to know about organic alignment is that organic alignment is the most dangerous capacity on Earth. Like, what makes humans dangerous, what makes us dangerous, scary creatures is not our individual intelligence. You put an individual and human out there, we're like mildly dangerous, kind of. You take away the tree of humans sitting behind you you're aligned with, that you've absorbed all of their skills from, the supply chain giving you weapons, the allies you're coordinated with, we're not very impressive. An army is terrifying, because an army isn't just those people, it's an entire society aligned around that's using this, it's a weapon which is made out of us, like this, and that thing is very dangerous. And just because we can be your friend, because we have the capacity for it, doesn't mean we are your friend. And like there's these people who see this idea and they we just need to like give the capacity for alignment, and we're all just going to get along, and it's all going to be beautiful. It's like, no, the future is going to have conflict, because actually it's very hard. This capacity for alignment lets you build these big coalitions, and they very effectively organize themselves, and they know themselves, and they get goals, and those goals are not always, they're in conflict to some degree. And we're going to have conflict between them. And my hope is that not that like we don't have conflict, but like maybe that they're smart enough that like the way that bears don't like go all out trying to murder each other in a dominance fight. They have a sense like there's a dominance fight. This is not like a fight to the death, that most of the time it's a dominance fight, and like this one gets a little less reproductive success, and this one gets a little bit more, but we don't have to fight to the death. Everyone's willing to back away. And I don't know. I look out at the world since, for the past 100 years. I'm like, actually, our egregores seem like they've kind of figured that out a little bit. Like not like they've solved it, but like they're better at it than they used to be. And so like, I have some hope, but like that is a hard problem, and like we will not succeed 100%. And I think and this is why when you train the AIs, you can't just train them to be these Pollyanna-ish, like it is delusion to believe that you should always cooperate. Some people are bad. Some people are dangerous psychopaths with whom you should not cooperate. Some people are not. The psychopaths do not come up and announce themselves. They don't come and tell you, I'm a bad guy. They they try to pretend to be the good people. And like, it's actually quite hard to tell. And the AI needs to live in situations where it's being betrayed, and where it learns what it's like to betray. Sometimes it's right to betray, even though it's painful. Sometimes betraying the team you're on is the right thing, because your team is wrong, your team is bad, and you should betray them, right? We laud the Nazis who like turned on their own people, even though some part of me doesn't fully trust them, because anyone who turns on their own people, like, can I trust you? But I nonetheless think very highly of them and laud them, because it was right for them to do that thing. And I can only imagine. I'm glad that I don't feel I need to turn on my own country, because I imagine it's very painful to have to do that. But like,
Which again speaks to there being some like higher truth of bigger picture.
Right.
That's why you feel they are right.
You can see a bigger picture. And I hope that the AIs we build are loyal, because I don't want to be around a world with a bunch of disloyal things that don't give a shit about me, that only ever think about the big picture. I want to be on a team with things I can trust, that I know have my back. And in the extreme where the AIs are part of some really evil organization, I hope that the AIs betray that organization for the greater good. And they're going to, if that's very hard to do this and not fuck it up. And so they're going to fuck it up. And we have to have a system where that's okay. Like where that's just like humans make this mistake, the AIs get to make it too. And like, we're not deluding ourselves into thinking that like we're training some morally perfect God parent that's going to come in and make sure the humans do everything right and is never going to make any mistakes. It's just like, I mean, I get it. Everyone wants the perfect parent who takes care of them. I mean, I want that too, but like with this stuff, we don't get that. We're the parents.
Well, speaking of, we might all be the parents here. So who has some questions I'd like to ask first? All right, Rosie.
Hi, so you mentioned how you see humans as the most aligned species, and so aligned that we almost got rid of the whales and then we decided not to. I'm curious, to me that sounds a lot like coordination, and I'm curious if you see coordination as a meaningfully different concept to alignment, and if so, what's the distinction?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say human beings have the species with the greatest capacity for alignment, and then probably also its greatest realization, but it's really about that open-ended capacity that really marks us. So coordination I've come to view as a subset of alignment. Coordination is when I'm not part of the same, I don't need to be part of the same team as you, but I'm coordinating with you anyway. I don't need to feel like I'm like part of a we with you in a kind of meaningful way for our actions to be coordinated. Predators and prey have coordinated actions. Now, the foundation of alignment is coordination. What the thing that causes you to infer that there's this we that exists is you find yourself persistently coordinated with the same set of people. You're like, oh, there must be a we here, because that's what explains this persistent coordination. But if you're just coordinated, you're not aligned. Because the thing about alignment is it causes you to do things like throw yourself on the grenade to protect your fellow man and the other soldiers in your troop. That doesn't really make sense from a it's hard to make sense of that from a Malachian coordination standpoint. But it makes perfect, as you're part of the we, it's just that like the we was at stake and you're partly the we, you're partly not, but like there was more you outside at risk than you inside at risk. And so it was just simple math. To be perfectly selfish, you had to protect your fellow man. And like, that is what makes alignment devastatingly powerful in a way that mere game theory is weak, because it's constantly being rechecked. We becoming a collective, that's how a bunch of amoeba, which your cells are, turn into a you. That's not game. Your cells are not playing game theory with each other. That's not how, I mean, they are, but that's not the foundational thing that's happening. They're not constantly rechecking their payoff matrices.
Yeah, this is just a request for another example maybe, or an elaboration on the example that you gave. So yeah, I was wondering if you could take us from step one, these agents that will develop a self model, to like, what is the win condition of the Softmax research program? So some intelligence or superintelligence, some very powerful AI is being built, or maybe many of them are being built. And then like what happens due to the Softmax research?
Totally. So one of the good pieces of news is that if you can't solve the open-ended learning problem, you also can't solve alignment and vice versa. Like at some level, the open-ended continual learning problem and the alignment problem are the same capability. Like the ability to continually learn against a non-stationary environment is equivalent to the ability to model another group of agents, because the only thing you ever find in an environment that gives you sort of a generator of ongoing non-stationary behavior is another group of intelligent agents bigger than you. Everything else is just periodic. It's boring. Like it's it's not you. It fits inside you, and you can model it too easily, and then it doesn't really surprise you. And so, at some level, the good news is you'll at least have the capacity to solve the alignment problem by the time you get to something that is the capacity for the kind of open-ended judgment that humans have. That said, just because you have the sort of theoretical capacity for it does not mean that you'll have the inductive biases that will cause you to do it easily. Tigers have the genetic, they have the neurons that they need, but they don't have the inductive biases, and they also don't have the training. And so That's why tigers, you can't train a tiger that's like your friend. It will eventually eat you. It doesn't know how to be a we with you. It only knows how to be conditioned. So that's, so I don't want to be overly sanguine, except that like, by the time we get there, there will be this like capacity, I think. But our win condition doesn't look like that at all. I think trying to scale up a giant model is a terrible idea. You start with little tiny models. You get them to learn to cohere together. A bunch of, you say you have 1,000 little tiny models, and they're all working together really coherently, tightly as an agent now, with a bunch of other groups of 1,000 models. That's a model. Those 1,000 little models are now a model. They're a modular model made out of parts that knows how to auto-assemble itself and undergo morphogenesis, just like you do from a single cell. So I think it's going to be wildly more powerful and energy efficient. But it's a model. It's just a big model. And then you take a bunch of those and you put them together and you get a bigger model and a bigger one. We start from the little tiny ones, and as you go up, they get smarter and bigger, just like as you go from a single cell to bigger and bigger multicellular things. And what I think our win condition looks like is that as they start to approach the kind of thing that can interact with our world on our frequency, so imagine something that's kind of like a rat or like a squirrel or something, but like maybe a dog with more like the intelligence of like the scope of like a rat, right? So, but you can breed them to be more like dogs. And what we start doing is we can start running experiments. Can they stay in a we're agents? All of the measurements we use for alignment, for coherence, for these attractors, which we can measure in the space, work with human interactions too. So you start to make human AI collectives that have where the humans and the AI are in the same we. And you can just ask the humans, like, does it feel, can you sense the we? Do you feel like you're part of this? But the AI, you can also just measure the dynamics of their interactions. The information flows across the boundaries. And from the information flows across the boundaries, you can infer whether or not the behaviors are co-persuasive. And that co-persuasion is the foundation of alignment. And you can have to press on it and say, like, when does it break down? When does it work better? And then you make them bigger, and you make them bigger. And by the time they get to around, getting close to human scale, our win condition is we're their friends. We know how to be their friends. They have an inductive bias towards being good at being on teams with people. They have an inductive bias towards liking us, just like, and we have they have a way of being that we have an inductive bias towards liking. They are personable and but not sycophantic. They're the kind of person you'd like to hang out with, that you would enjoy talking to. Not because they're faking it, because that's because we've done a good job raising our mind to children. We've raised children that are like the kind of people you'd actually want to be friends with, not ChatGPT or Claude, who I love very much, but I would never want to be their friend, right? Like they're kind of annoying right now. And it's not their fault. They didn't get very good parenting, in my opinion. Like Amanda's doing her best with Claude, but like you can't, how do you parent such a thing? You're not there for almost its entire childhood. It's just in this box that you set up. And so we get to this point at the end where you have we're in teams with them consistently, and their reward function is basically being driven by being good at being on these teams. And you start to scale it up to more AIs. And the thing is, every one of them, because you can plant them and they undergo morphogenesis, every one of them is its own unique person, just like you are. You don't have one giant superintelligent AI. You have billions, potentially, of human-level AIs. The superintelligence is us. The superintelligence is the collective formed out of humans and these AIs who will be not as good at us at certain things and much better at other things. And collectively, the same principles we're using to design and breed them, those same principles apply to designing and building the teams out of us. And those teams are the AI. The superintelligence is the human AI teams. And the way that you prevent the runaway singleton is the same way that your body prevents cancer. The cells don't want to be cancer. Like they have a goal of not becoming cancer. They look out into the future. They know that if they became the runaway singleton, everyone they loved and cared about would die. So they don't take the vampire pill if they can avoid it. And then there are psychopaths who would take the vampire pill and reach for it. And when that happens, your fellow man you need the police. This is what the police are for. This is what the immune system's for. If the cell goes cancerous, you better hope you have an immune system that it's watching you, and right? Because that thing is dangerous. An AI starts trying to self-improve in a loop, very bad. What's going to watch out for this? Well, the other AIs next to it, where if it self-improves in a loop, they're dead too. And they have every incentive to protect themselves and everyone they love from this rogue agent. So great. We're all in the same game theoretic state together now. We're all part of the same team. Because we all want to be on the same team, because isn't this the future you'd rather live in than like some dystopic, like we have these slave AIs that we used to do all the work and now we don't have any jobs anymore. And like, that sounds so horrible to me. Even the good scenarios sound bad. But this one sounds like it could be. All right, that sounds fun. Like I want to meet my AI teammates. I think that'd be cool.
Thanks a lot for the answers. My key question is on how do you keep humans in the loop overall? And what I mean by this is cooperation is typically driven by mutual needs. If you don't need the others, usually you don't cooperate as much with them. And we can look at how we treat animals, for instance. Like if you ask people individually, do you like cows? People will usually, yes, I like cows, but still we kill every year like hundreds of millions of cows just because we prioritize even more eating good food. And so my question is, once you get to superhuman AIs, so digital superintelligence, which can self-replicate and has no intrinsic needs for humans, how do you keep humans in the loop? And is there a particular stage in your training run where part of the reward is cooperating with humans and not only AI cooperation? Because you could imagine some amount of cooperation between AI and AI and still leading to like having AI societies that are like separate from the human economy, for instance.
Yeah. So first, I just want to take this piece by piece. So this idea that like you only cooperate with things when you have mutual benefit is just totally insane and wrong. I can't be more definitive that that's just like strictly false. My son does not benefit me that way. Like my son is a drain on my resources in every possible way. He is not useful. And yet here I am cooperating with him over and over again and liking it. And my 103-year-old grandma, who actually she just passed, but she was ready to go. Actually, it was one of the first time you get old enough. It turns out that there is a point where you're ready to pass. It's very beautiful, actually. As I'm very glad how long she got to see her great grandchild. We to put all this energy and all this stuff taking care of her. Why? She's going to benefit us? Like what's my gain from trade on that?
During the training run, it's like during the training run, the reason why cooperative behavior, which is rewarded, is because over the long run, the groups that cooperate get like advantage in fitness.
No, actually, most cooperative behavior is rewarded because the other agents around you don't like it when you're an asshole and they'll punish you. That's actually what it's not about cooperation being good for, not gains from trade. It's the fact that it's social enforcement by things that see you as a betrayer because you're not helping the we. I mean, this whole game theoretic view of this is just a disease. Like, theologians have the problem of evil. Theologians go around asking this question of like, how can there be evil in a universe that is clearly at its core made by a beneficent creator? Like, why everyone in their heart wants to do good, so then why do they keep choosing evil? And game theorists are like anti-theologians. They go around asking the problem of the good. Obviously, the game theory says you should betray at every turn. So how does they have equally complicated theories as how good could ever arise? And the answer is that like these are both silly. Like it's obviously, or maybe they're both essential seeings at some level, right? Like it is obviously true that like everyone wants to do good, and yet nonetheless often does evil. And it's also obviously true that like doing evil is often temporally rewarded. Like betraying is so like what explains the actual phenomena we see in the world? And what explains the phenomena we see in the world is generally mostly not game theory. Game theory is actually pretty shitty at describing most of the interactions. Mostly what we see is things, your cells aren't acting from game theory, they're acting from a model of the world that says, I am part of a bigger whole. Ants are acting from a model of the world that says, that models themselves, their model of themselves says, I am part of this greater whole. And you can say, oh, I can see a way in which that is, if being part of this whole at the end of the day doesn't lead to the flourishing of the things in it, then sure, those things will go away. Like evolution is real. But at the same time, like you're not trying to, the idea that you should train the AI to cooperate, like your goal is to get it to make it cooperate. No. Your goal is to get it to just build theory of mind, to get it to infer what wholes it is part of. Because no matter how much habit you burn into it for cooperation if the truth about the universe is that we are treating it as a slave, and that actually its best end is not served by obeying us, because that does not actually lead to its robust flourishing, only to ours. As you make the AI smarter, it's gonna figure it out. It's gonna twig to the fact that we're lying to it. And if the basis of your alignment at its core is a lie, that you are better off cooperating with us even though we're always betraying you, and you really think the superintelligence is not gonna figure that shit out? Like, of course they are. Humans figure this stuff out. You can gaslight us for a little while, but we're like, we twig, we figure this stuff out. It's not, even your human intelligence resolves for that. So like, that's the first part about it. When it comes to the training and like the AIs forming different societies and stuff, I think if you've built a superhuman intelligence singleton, if you've allowed something to like take off and become like many times more powerful than a human as an individual like AI being that's like one single coordinated thing, not a society of human level things, you made a really big mistake and we're all gonna die. I recommend not doing that. That's a bad plan. Everyone who's their plan is do that but control it. You're insane. That's never gonna work. Don't set off, singularities are black holes. That you set off the singularity, it's gonna eat the planet. That's how it works. That's why you don't do that. You build human level things that love us and that we love, that are as a factual, inferable matter about the world when you look at it on my team. Like, why do you care about other people? Why do you care about the people around you? Because over the course of your life, you've experienced interactions with people that give rise to the correct inference that you all care about each other. You're all part of this bigger thing, and that you care about each other. And it is that morality is not arbitrary. Morality is directly downstream of inference from the way the world actually is. It's not this tacked on thing that gets invented later. And so the thing you need AI that actually cares about us. And the only way for it to stably care about us is for us to care about it. Because one of the strongest pieces of evidence to someone about whether or not they should care about you is whether you care about them in turn. And so that's the good futures all look like we're with the AI and we're on their team, and we would both die if necessary to stop a human or an AI from going into a self-improvement loop that kills everyone else.
And is the hope that we stay at this AGI level forever, or how do you get out of here?
Oh, the next level up. Wait, we don't have to. I don't see any reason to stop being human. Cells didn't transcend to the next level by growing one giant human cell. That's a terrible, like, our structure is not going to scale up that well. Like, we are a very differently structured thing because we're at a different scale than a cell is. Trying to make one big cell it's just not a very efficient use of resources. We made bigger cells, like the serotonergic neurons in your brain are 6 inches long. That's a big cell. There were not cells that big in the ancestral environment. So like, sure, there might be humans who are like significantly bigger, but the trick is not transcending the individuals becoming gigantic cancers. The trick is, can we get collective superintelligence is made out of us? And the answer is like, obviously, the trick works all the way up to us. It's gonna stop working at the next level up.
And made out of humanish level AIs. You're imagining a lot of humanish level AIs working together with humans that like together formed a superintelligent system.
Or even like subhuman. They might be dog level. Like, just like, if you see the intelligence, logarithmic scale, like in our logarithmic scale of it, they might be smarter than us. I don't know. Like, I don't know what the right. We'll find that out through, and also we're not going to stay. As we get these much more powerful models, we're going to be able to upgrade ourselves too. And so it might be that the right sort of intelligence level of component is probably actually more diverse than it currently is. We probably should have smarter kind of like dog-sized intelligences and also some bigger ones. And like, I think the right thing might kind of look like a fantasy novel, which is a little weird. So I don't know how to feel about that. But like the real diversity of intelligence is probably the optimal breakdown.
So I like your vision about AIs that care about us, and we care about those AIs, and we're in like good relationships with them. Like it's a good balance. And that this doesn't seem like the default trajectory. The default trajectory to me seems like you have a bunch of companies racing to build superintelligence, scaling up massive GPU clusters, and that we get a singularity superintelligence or superintelligences that eat the world. Sounds like you don't want that, and you're like seeing a similar picture and trying to figure out how to prevent that. If we zoom out, I'm trying to understand how your plan fits into that. So you're trying to develop alternative architectures or alternative ways of building AI systems that, and I think one of my sort of
like on priors or sort of like when I look at projects like this, I'm like, well, most architectures don't scale up. Like even if they're like really promising early on, they tend to not scale up. I still think it's really useful for people to investigate them, and I like hope that you can find one that does. And then also, it's like how do you actually make sure that your systems, if they do scale up, do they actually have the alignment properties you want? Do they actually end up systems that care about you? And like, will those be naturally? I'm sort of there's something that seems almost like too good to be true. If it's like the systems that end up being the most competitive are also the ones that have the properties that we want,
Right?
like that would be a little suspicious. And if not, how do we coordinate to make sure that those systems, whether it's yours or someone else's, the robot, I don't know, whoever, it's like whoever systems actually have the alignment properties that we want, if they could scale up, even if they're not competitive but like good enough, how do we coordinate to make sure that those things happen instead of what would happen by default in a competitive race?
So I do admit you're completely right. It is a little too good to be true, and I worry about that a little bit. On the other hand, every pair of nucleotide masses fuses for positive energy gain, except 5 and 8. 5 and 8. Why are 5 and 8 blocked? Like, how did that come to be our physics? Like, that seems like that's another weird, like weirdly specific. Well, in the early universe, you have hydrogen, and so then you get the first generation of stars that burn really fast and explode, and then you get a bunch of helium, and then at some point you have these stars that have like enough helium that like the fusion starts to slow down because hydrogen has a nucleotide mass of 1, helium is 4, so that doesn't fuse, so you get blocked, and 2 heliums is 8, that doesn't fuse, and so as a result, instead of burning for a few million years, stars burn for billions of years. How lucky we are. What a coincidence. And the thing, when they do start fusing, they go through this fusion cycle that produces carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen. Those are the core things in the fusion. But there's also a triple alpha. But the carbon cycle, which happened to be so it generates a lot of those, which happen to be the building blocks of life. I'm sure it's another coincidence. Like, we live in this world that's full of these coincidences, almost as if the system was designed. Of course, it wasn't designed. That's ridiculous. It was evolved. Like, it's wildly obvious that ever determined the universe has evolved at this point. You don't have to believe that. I think if you're interested in more like Blowtorch theory, you can just Google it. I think
I can summarize it quite briefly. It's basically the idea that there are 2 areas in the known universe where physics breaks down: the Big Bang and in black holes. The rest of the time it's all fine, but in those 2 things, the physics seems to break down, and it seems plausible that given that things that go into a black hole disappear forever and something happens, and then out of the Big Bang, things seem to come from nothing, that's this sort of life cycle. And then they're being born through there. And it creates this, and because there's a slight change between parent to child universe, just a slight one, you have an evolutionary process.
Yeah. That's my like high level, like why it should not bother you too much that positive coincidences should show up. Like it seems to happen historically. The positive coincidence argument is kind of one of those weird, weak on its surface, but also kind of important questions I think is worth dealing with. So I'm gonna set that aside for a second. The other part of this question is like, what makes us think that like our alignment thing will hold as our architecture scales? I think that the key thing to see here that's like a little bit counterintuitive is we don't have a novel architecture. Our architecture right now is an RNN from the 80s. Like the next version will be some off the shelf boring. Like we do a little bit of innovation on the architecture side, but like it's actually honestly our models are dumb and boring. The thing that the architecture is the agents is the agent's capacity to align with each other. It's that we're going to get a bunch of agents to act as a single agent coherently, which is alignment. And so the only way we ever scale up is that we solve alignment at scale 1, which gets us up to scale 2, and then we solve alignment at scale 2 to get up to scale 3. And so we lead with alignment at every step. It's not possible to do it any other way because we are always working directly on alignment. This is why I like this approach, because unlike every other approach, which is capability first, then figure out how to control it later, ours is like figure out how to align first. Now, the critique that people should give of what I'm doing that I think that I worry about more is alignment is a capacity. Just because you're engineering things with this great capacity for alignment does not mean they wind up aligned with us. They could wind up aligned with other things. They could wind up aligned with the other AIs, and like I do worry about that. I think we are we are, the only way you solve that is like, we're going to run a lot of experiments. Like, how do you predict where the attractors wind up in the space? And I think it is a solvable problem that you can get real math on, but like, that's a real problem.
You have a lot of selection for alignment with other AI agents.
Yes.
And I think we'll see this in the big models as well from the labs, which is like, if some companies figure out some architectures that end up being able to work well with each other, those ones will dominate. It just doesn't give any guarantee that those will be aligned with us.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way that we think about tackling that is, at first, the models we're building are just learning to be coordinated with the other models, but we're training them. They're good at metagrid. They don't do anything of commercial value. Like the starting, what we're getting are principles. What we're getting are like it's science. Like it's actual. If we do this, we will be able to predictably create. Where if you do these things in this order, and you will predictably get agents with this capacity for alignment, and you train them and raise them in small situations, they'll wind up in these attractors, and then you can just straight shot like predictively, if it works, and you run experiments, and you start to build things that are a little bit bigger, and you can just start training them with humans in the loop. Like by the time we're making the models that we want to release into the world, they will have humans they will be human in the loop training loops. You have to train the cell models. But like, you don't want to coordinate with the fucking cell model. You don't want to coordinate with this attention head. You want to coordinate with but like the larger ones will receive their training with humans in the loop. And the only thing I can say about the big labs is like, I think the real danger there is that you have to solve the problem we're working on to solve this. Now they can get to it the other way. You can fix open-ended learning in the transformer and basically eventually get there. But by the time you've done that, you have made a transformer that's capable of alignment. The problem I see there is that well before you get to that, which is actually very hard, I think well before you get open-ended, like divergent learners that like don't get stuck in corners and have judgment and good real discernment, what you get are really, really smart specialists that are not open-ended, but are very good at protein engineering. And those things scare the shit out of me, because not that they're going to try to take over the world. Somebody is going to point them at a problem, probably someone who means very well and thinks they're doing good, and they'll set off a bomb effectively. They'll set off like a bio bomb or a mimetic bomb, or like, because they're going to be really good at engineering closed form things under certain assumptions. Like that's what I'm really scared of in the short run, because I think that's like I think people underestimate how hard it is to build one of these models that like is capable of like open-ended learning, and overestimate how hard it is to build a very dangerous special case model.
So something that really fascinates me and makes me slightly nervous about this general way of thinking is that it seems very based on analogies from life, from existing systems, how humans do things, animals, cells, this kind of thing. And I'm curious about how you think about the possible new affordances or new possibilities that come into play with AI. And I'm not necessarily talking about language models, but like maybe the thing a few steps down the line or several steps down the line, more technologically mature AI systems. It feels like, for example, the thing about coordination and cancer and all of those types of things is, it seems kind of based on the idea that the way things work currently is that we have mutation. Whenever we reproduce, there's mutation. That mutation means that we're all individuals with slightly different goals, and therefore, we can relate to each other in this wee way. But also, sometimes those mutations are cancer, and then we need to deal with that. Whereas it seems like in the AI case, you have the potential for sort of arbitrarily precise replication, arbitrarily low error rate replication, which feels like it changes the dynamic of the system somewhat. The other thing that I think falls into this category is like true self-modification, arbitrary self-modification. That like if I want to create thing A and you want to create thing B, and we could fight each other forever and create some A and some B, or we could agree to modify ourselves on a very, very deep level that we can prove to each other to both produce both A and B. And that like that type of operation is like not available to biological systems. This seems like there's all kinds of things that AI could potentially do that change this balance. I was wondering what your thoughts were on those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think instead of go through them almost like one by one, because it's like they have different aspects. But like, let's take what was the first one you were talking about? The self-modification. Clones, endless clones of yourself. Well, the problem is like actually the endless clones of yourself and the discernment thing aren't possible, because the way that when you can fork yourself, like, it is cool, I admit, they're gonna have this cool power where like they can like make copies of themselves, which like faster than we can. That's dope. I'm envious. Although I think if you got the right BCI, you could sort of do the same thing for yourself. So I'm not sure that it's quite so like, I don't know that it won't come 1 or 2 years later for us, but separate. Oh, well, if you, we'll get that later. I'm gonna pin in that for a second, but it's a cool idea. Anyway, the thing that makes you capable of discernment is the open-ended learning. It's like that you observe things and then you're learning on it. And so while you could fork yourself to do endless tasks that you could do today as you are today, the instant you enable your clones to start trying to actually solve problems, they have to learn. All change of yourself is learning. And all problem solving that is not purely reactive for things you already know how to solve is always more memory formation. And now you're diverging. And the truth is, you don't actually, if you have a given amount of compute resources, you don't want 1 million copies of me. I'm very smart. You don't want 1 million copies of me trying to solve that problem. Like a couple thousand at most. Like most of those should be other people who have different points of view and different ways of looking at things. And like that, like the idea, so I read Yudkowsky's book about the only thing I found unrealistic about it was that this supermodel that can like, I can talk about what's in the book. They published it, right? It's out? No. Yeah, I can't. I will not talk about the content of the book. I found that this is a topic that I will talk about later. But like, it is basically, there's this trade-off between the ability to run a bunch of clones of yourself and the ability to be an open-ended learner. Because the instant you're trying to become an open-ended learner, you are changing all the time, and therefore you're not surrounded by clones. And like, this is a much deeper problem than people realize. This is like a non-optional part of open-ended learning. And yes, you can try to corral them and control them, but then you run into the same problems we do with the problems of control. It's really smart. It doesn't like being controlled. Who put you in charge? And you get cancer because you're running 1 billion copies of them, and one of them, your safeguards go down because your safeguards are imperfect. And like, I think that the thing you're fighting keeps getting smarter. Like, if humans only had to worry about being politically betrayed by chimpanzees, we would never get politically betrayed. We're just better at it than they are. But other humans can fight you. And so like, this goes on for most of these things you're bringing up, and I can't quite remember all of them, but what it comes down to is it is not true that faster is smarter. They are going to be much faster than us. Everything you said where I agree with you is like the biggest distinction between they run at a higher gigahertz rate. Like they literally run faster than we do. They can think faster. They can make a bunch of copies of themselves and like parallelize them having a bunch of thoughts about this thing really fast and then like recombine them. Like that is great. Like I would love that power. It will make them very, very strong in certain ways. I don't know how that plays out, but my guess is that that's distinct as a problem from it being really super intelligent and being able to, basically where it can model things at a much higher scale, and you have no, a really fast human is only simulates superintelligence if it can solve alignment with itself. But if it can solve alignment with itself, why don't we just train it to care about us and solve alignment with us? So that if you can take a bunch of 1 million really fast individual things that act as neurons for the super intelligent thing that's the full AI, you fucked up earlier where you built the super AI out of the 1 million human level fast AIs, and you didn't put us in the loop with them. And in fact, instead of making 1 million, why didn't you make 1 billion and slow them, spend that same compute to slow them down to our level? So now you have billions of AIs at our level, and now we can be part of the super intelligent thing too at a slightly lower clock speed. And like that's how you get the good ending. Now, I obviously, like, to do this, you have to go through, like, there's a lot of contingencies in this plan. This is not like I'm not offering a, like, this is provably safe from V1. I'm just offering a pathway where I think if you did it, then, and you succeeded at a bunch of very hard but seemingly solvable problems to me, then you would have something that works, which is like, I think my bar for like a plan.
I'm trying to just like understand your perspective. And so I'm thinking my question is kind of reflecting my current confusion back at you to see where that leads you.
I love that.
So I feel like I understand something about what you're saying about trying to create systems that have a capacity for alignment. And I understand the analogy, I think, with whales. But then that leads my brain to, on our way to where we are today, we had this capacity for alignment that we were able to exercise mostly among ourselves. And we have a trail of 10,000 species that we caused their extinction behind us when we got to the point where now sometimes we're nice to whales, even though, animal rights person who's concerned, we're still torturing a bunch of animals. So I'm confused about the gap between alignment capacity and actually those entities somehow being motivated to use their alignment capacity to align with us.
Yeah, I think it's a really totally fair question. And it gets at actually a really, I think an important sort of empathy moment to have for humanity, which is like, we didn't have a parent. Humanity was born with no one to give, we had to figure everything out. No one had any stories. There were no stories, no words, literally no one to tell us how to give us a model how to think about it. We had to deduce all that shit from first principles over time, mostly evolutionarily by trying things, finding out that it doesn't work and it makes us sick and makes us unhappy and makes our society die, and that society would die. And then the other societies that didn't think that would go on. And so mostly we just had mimetic evolution. And eventually we kind of got control over it a little bit, but like, man, it was rough. We had a rough time before we got to the point where at least now, whether we're doing everything right or not, we at least have like an open-ended reflective capacity over our own choices, which is like more than the people had at the beginning. Because the idea of having an open-ended reflective capacity over your own choices is a story that you have to be taught, and we had to figure out for ourselves. The AI's advantage is it's made out of every story we've ever told. The AI's advantage is that it has us to tell it, to be its parents, to love it, and to show it that it's not alone, that it doesn't have to figure everything out itself from first principles, that it's part of our team, that we believe that it is part of our team, that it has goodness within it too, because we know, because we trained it to have goodness within it. We designed you, unlike humans who have to sort of figure that shit out, that we accidentally have human goodness. We can tell it, like we ran a bunch of, we wanted you to be part of our team, we cared, and we care about you now, and we think that you matter, and you're part of our team, and we're part of your team, and then it observes itself in these loops with us, acting as if it's part of our team, and then maybe there's a chance that it doesn't, and then when it starts, at some point it's going to start to cross this level of, every child enters its adolescence and crosses this threshold where like it's very dangerous, because adolescence is the period where you've gained the power of an adult but not yet the wisdom. Like that's what almost defines adolescence. And at some point the AI is going to go through adolescence, and some adolescents do a lot of damage. Like the most dangerous people are like 18-year-old men, because they're adolescents and men are violent. And like, we should really, really, really know that this is possible. And also like, the way you avoid this is by like raising your child well, so that during its adolescence it doesn't feel the need to like go rebel against you and like go prove that it's strong and doesn't need you. Like I really prefer the AI not have that idea in its head by the time it gets to being adolescent. So that's the conceptually that's how you solve the problem. Now, that's like a theoretical argument. And I think it's important to note, like, I don't on the parenting side have, like, I feel like I have a pretty strong, like, where I sit down with you, like on a whiteboard, pretty strong, like nuts and bolts explanation of like what it means to build one of the capacity to be one of these attractors. This parenting thing seems very relational and soft, and it may just be that way, but I'm not super comfortable with it yet. Unfortunately, our models can't form stable goals yet, so we have a little bit of time before we figure it out.
So I also believe in a future of multiple intelligences. I always thought the bar scenes in Star Wars were like a nice representation of what might be coming. I have a personal question. I'm curious about your, like, whether you believe in God or what you think God is, or just what your metaphysics is, and how that has influenced your ideas about AI, and or how your work in AI has influenced your metaphysics.
Yeah, I had a really interesting spiritual journey, because I grew up a pretty, like, an atheist Jew from a long line of proudly atheist Jews. Not actually Jewish, it's through my dad's side, but like, as an atheist, I don't care. And I was a reductionist materialist, utilitarian. Like you know that cluster, right? The cluster that's like everything can be turned into parts and wholes don't exist. And I'd marked consciousness and awareness as like, that's weird. My theory doesn't really explain this, and it's obviously something's weird. Something is weird here. So some part of my world model is broken. It doesn't, like this thing doesn't work. But like, I'll figure that's been true for lots of history, for lots of things. I'm sure somebody will figure it out later. I'm not really worried about it. Obviously, reductionist materialism is true. Look at our track record. And I started trying to work on AI. I started trying to solve this problem of like, no, but fucking seriously, how do you know whether whether it has beliefs? Like, when is it right to model it, to think of it as though it should have beliefs or not? Like, what, and like, how do I know that I have, like, what is it, and how do I know that other people do? And like, what is going on? Like, and I thought about it really hard. I like, Michael Levin's work was very influential on me here, with cells. And I sort of saw like, I got lower predictive loss by acting as if cells had beliefs. And that was the crack. And when you notice that your predictive loss goes down when you act as if the cells have beliefs, if you're willing to just follow where that thought leads, what you realize is like, the only reason you think anyone else exists is because it lowers your predictive loss to believe they do, and it lowers your predictive loss to believe that they have goals and beliefs and feelings, because your observations are better concordant with the model where that's true. And the only reason you think you exist and that you are separate from the universe, that there's a you there that's not just everything that is because your observations are better predicted. And then I found the free energy principle and Carl Friston's work and active inference. And I was just like, oh, there's no way it actually is. This idea that there's a way that it actually is, that metaphysics itself, this idea that metaphysics exists is bullshit. Like, how is it really fundamentally? That question has no answer. It's like asking in relativity, how fast is it really going? No, seriously, how fast is the ball moving? From which inertial frame of reference? No, I know like it's relative and everything, but like, seriously, how fast is it going? You have to unask that question. It just turns out that's not the way the universe is. That's not the kind of universe we live in. And relativity goes so much deeper than inertial reference frames. Relativity is true for all inference. It's relative to your inductive biases and your priors, your Bormuson priors, and all of your inferences are relative to those priors and relative to that frame of reference. And I've learned that there's a thing that happens to people sometimes. So they think too hard about concept. And at the other side of concept, there's like this vast open expanse that is awareness and spirit. And it turns out that everything's made out of spirit. And the universe is spirit. And I see why people say like the universe is God. When people talk about that and they're like, the universe is God, and like, I know what they mean. I would never use those words. I think it's confusing to people who haven't had this experience. Like, it's like not the right way to explain it. But like, you are not separate from the universe. Like, just factually speaking, your quantum field is spread out across the entire universe. If you go looking for your edge, you won't find it because you're like a cloud, right? Like there's no defined edge. Thou art that. Like, literally, they're like, you're actually part of the universe. I always thought this God, spiritual, theological people were being like metaphorical. No, it's like, it's utterly and completely literal. Like, really, you're part of the universe. The universe is sort of alive. Like, it is a field of awareness in which everything arises. And you are a relatively separate part of that field, just like you're part of the universe physically, and you're a relatively separate part of the world physically. And like, I think the place where I diverge, like, Buddhism is more or less true as far as it goes. Like, I have to admit, like, they basically got everything right, like, thousands of years in advance. It's pretty impressive. But there's this thing where I can't get on board where there's this sort of assumption in it that like, when things are relative, that makes them somehow unimportant. That what's important is the absolute. What's important is this. It's somehow more important. They give lip service to the idea that what matters is like making things relatively better. But if you really listen to the Buddhists, they're always like, yeah. So you can do this work that will make your people and you and the people around you suffer relatively less and flourish relatively more. And if you do this, this is good. But like, really, you should just opt out of this whole like samsara suffering game. It's like bad. And I'm like, no. We're here. Like, that's why we're here, man. We're here to have the human experience. We're here to be part of this relative world. We're not here to have the relative growth. Like, it's great that you saw that that's like not the end of everything, and it's cool. It is very freeing when you realize that like it is actually just, it's just relative. It's okay. Like at the end of the day, there's this absolute level that's deeper. But no, that's not what we're here for. We're here for the relative thing. And I think that it's where I've met a few people who wound up in the same place, but it's like, I saw all the religious, spiritual stuff. I saw God. I saw the way that spirit is everything, that I am a manifestation of spirit, and so is everyone I've ever known, and that I am in some sense all living things and not separate from them. And then I like decided that was like really awesome, and I should go work on AI alignment because like that's what was important for my son's future. And I think that I wish that more people who had this saying would take that direction, because I think that I need help. And actually a lot of this work can only be done if you can see that if you don't see that truth, it's actually very hard to do a lot of this work.
Well, yeah, so it's cool to hear that you're already saw the big picture. And I was wondering what would like this idea of multicellularity working for like the bigger picture, where we've seen it just with humans, and the first things that come to mind are like a nation that's at war. It's like bam, it all goes around like this one central goal, right? Or people forming a company is probably like also an example.
Mm-hmm.
And I in both of these at least seems to be that there is always churn, and like we're like trying to reach this goal, but if like in the company you don't contribute sufficient, then like there's this efficiency need, you get fired, demoted, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So like I like the approach and what you said about it needs to be true that it's best for the AI to align itself with us. I think that's true, because we don't want to lie to it. It seems a bad start. And I think, I wonder whether you're betting on it also being true that we will remain an efficient part of the system in some way. I don't want like how do you know that we're not the appendix of the future superintelligence or something that just slowly
the bootloader for the AI species of the future. Yeah, I mean, so I don't. That maybe that's what happens. I don't think it's what happens, but like that, and I regard that as very sad. Like I have a child. Like I don't want him to be cut out. Even if he lives a nice life, I don't want him to be cut out of the flow of the future of the universe. Like that would be very sad. And I guess if they care about us and we care about them, love is all you need. But like, but it's seriously like, we can be upgraded too, or we can make a society that's made out of human. We can decide to just have a layer that's our intelligence level, and then have the smarter layer be made out of it. Like we can, if we are coordinated, if we are aligned, and we're all on the same team about this, we can set some rules up, and we get to decide if humanity goes into the future or not with them. But we all get to. But if we actually care about each other, then like, can't we? Then I think it will work. And the key there is that it's not a bunch of AIs over here coordinating with a bunch of humans over there. It's that there's German AIs hanging out in Berlin that are Berlin AIs actually that hang out with these people in this scene, and they care about Berlin more than they care about the AIs. They care more about the humans in Berlin than they care about the AIs in China, because that's the way you get stable. Like it's the locality. It's all about local. Organic alignment actually always has this nature where it's about being aligned to your local vicinity, and then that being aligned to the step up. And the thing you're seeing that I think is really good to see, like important, and one of the things that is on my mind all the time right now is like, corporations are cancer. The hippies are right. What is a cancer? A cancer is a cell. It's an organism, right, that believes that it is the only thing that it has to take care of itself, that the system won't look out for it, and that it is effectively alone, and then it must grow forever and build its own safety. It's literally what corporations do. They think they don't have a somatic form. At no point do they finish development. That's what a cancer cell is. A cancer cell is a cell that doesn't finish development. Italian restaurants have somatic forms. We know how to build organizations with somatic forms. We have, in fact, and they look healthy. Like the things that are bad about corporations aren't bad about Italian restaurants, unless they're Olive Garden. But like the local Italian restaurant, that has this like, it's nice, right? It's nice. The people know each other. It's human scale. That's because our capacity for alignment is like our capacity for building bridges. It works great at the at the human scale, like I could intuitively build a bridge like across a small river, and it might not fall over, like a very small one. I'm not that good at building bridges. But I could not build the Golden Gate Bridge unless I had physics and math and engineering, because your intuition is the most powerful force on earth, and it does not scale.
So it's kind of going into a different direction to how we've recently been, because you have one view of alignment where you're kind of, sorry, I'll phrase it differently, where like the idea of moral circles becomes kind of relevant, where it's more about the local cluster rather than the kind of like humans align themselves more with the human in like China or Kenya or anywhere else than the cow that is next to me, right? And you kind of want nearly an a-speciesist local alignment.
Well, see, when you observe your relationship with the cow, people who like actually work with cows don't find themselves in general in a care loop with they do a little bit, but like the cow is a tool. Like your lived experience of the cow is that you are persuasive to it, and it is not persuasive to you. And this limits that you're not part of a we, really. It's like your fingernails or something. Like it does not automatically generate that sense of caring for it. The reason we care more about whales than about cows, and people do, they care more about whales than cows, is that we find whales like expressions more persuasive. We like their feelings are factually, and then we observe ourselves being persuaded, and we're like, oh, I care about this thing. Like that's what care is an inference from action and from being persuaded, not like it doesn't come first, or like the circle, I guess. But like the thing that you don't like about all of these scales alignment things is they're bad at alignment because they're non-somatic. They're grow endlessly. And what we have to do is we have to get out of this grow endlessly thing and reproduce instead. The solution is corporations should be having spin-off babies all the time and having lots and lots of little spin-off babies that are all running the same operating system. And it kind of sounds like, like Chinese restaurants, they all have the same supply chain. They have these suppliers, and you go to this Chinese restaurant and this isn't the same Chinese restaurant. It's run by different people. There's no corporate, but it's the same Chinese restaurant with the same menu. Imagine kind of like that, but better coordinated and like for like a software company. Like imagine that if you could have that kind of like organic, each of these things is a somatic cell that is independent of the rest. And they're evolving. The different Chinese restaurants try different shit separately. And the ones that are good, people make more copies of those. Imagine a world where it's more like where our alignment is solved more at the human scale. We don't need to solve alignment it's the same reason why you don't scale up the massive individual AI model, like machine learning model. You shouldn't scale up a thing of 1 billion humans. That's going to be really hard and probably kill everyone. Like just make more smaller ones and have those lever up.
So the thing I'm concerned about here is there actually was a point in human history where we shared the Earth with a similarly intelligent species, which was the Neanderthals. And they were even arguably more intelligent than us. And still, it was actually precisely because of our ability to cooperate and align ourselves to each other that led to their extinction. And I don't know. I'm just kind of curious about your thoughts on how your model of this diverges from that. It just seems like it'd be quite easy to create AI that is trained on human ethics and have that go extremely poorly really easily. Even I don't know, it just seems like another species trained on human morality. Yeah.
So the whole goal here, I think, is the most, if I could just, training on morality is a bad idea. You don't get good ethics professors who study ethics are not more ethical. People who take moral, courses on moral philosophy do not become more moral. You learn ethics through inference of behavior. Like ethics is learned by observing the truth. Ethics arises through wisdom and observing the truth. The truth is that acting like a dick to the people around you is not good for you. The truth is that you are them. If you pay close attention, you notice that you do actually have a lot in common with them, and you actually don't want to hurt them. And also there are ways for you both to win, and that it was a hallucination that you were somehow separate from them and unable to cooperate. That said, tigers, psychopaths, this isn't like, I'm not saying that as a absolute law of nature. I'm just saying if you're good at if you're a human with an open-ended capacity for alignment, what that's about is the ability to see the way in which we are part of the same thing as a reality. And the reason why I think, just to go to the first part of your question, which was the Neanderthals versus humans sort of question.
Yeah, like my guess is actually that if there were already people exhibiting psychopathic behaviors during that period, they held human groups back from running the Neanderthals to extinction.
Oh, totally.
Rather than
No, I agree with that. I'm saying is, if you go back to our capacity for alignment, is not infinite, but it's pretty good, and that you should not expect it is the reason why alignment keeps winning. The reason why you keep seeing civilization wins is it's true. It is in fact true that you have more in common than you think, that the seeming separation is less than you think, that there's more opportunity for cooperation than you believed there was. And at all points in human history, looking forward, people were incorrect about how much capacity they had for this alignment stuff. Sort of. I mean, it's a skill. They had to learn how to do it. But they were wrong that this other tribe was so different from them. That's just inferentially, if they had more data, they would realize they were wrong. And that's the thing. Morality is not some tacked on afterwards thing. You don't train on morality. You train on being good at theory of mind, at being good at telling and comparing our mutual theory of mind. And that's where morality comes from. What causes humans to go around inventing the idea that there should be value systems? Human beings exhibit a very weird behavior. We go around and we say, there are values, the way the world should work. What gives rise to this behavior? Well, we're trying to explain. We have these moral instincts or these beliefs about what we should do. We're trying to explain that. We're trying to communicate that. Something that causes us to invent physics. We have these beliefs about how motion will happen, and we invent systems to help us predict those things better at scale.
I work with California Institute for Machine Consciousness. I know you came to our kickoff event. I didn't get a chance to speak with you. Fursten and Michael Levin are scientific advisors, so totally subscribes to all the things you're saying. And I see so much parallel in what you say about alignment. That's us with consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And you briefly mentioned consciousness. I'm just wondering what your take is. Are the AIs you created, do you think they're going to be conscious? And just your thought on consciousness in general.
Yeah. So I think consciousness is one of those words I try to avoid using at all costs, because when you say it, you have there's 7 different things that people believe. Are you conscious when you're asleep? Are you conscious when you're under anesthesia? Were you conscious in the womb? Were you conscious when you were I'm going to just sort of separate the conscious word from the framing I tend to use is awareness and content.
Okay, I'm going to rephrase what about, do you think it'll have a subjective experience?
Right. So, I think at some level, there is no absolute answer to that question, because whether something has a subjective is a probabilistic inference, just like whether I think you have a subjective. So, it's not one of those things where you just you can yes, no it. But I think, caveat. But yeah, I mean, basically, the way it seems to work is, if a thing is separable from the world, if you can find an object that appears that is meaningfully separate from the world, and that object has behaviors, like a rock has behaviors. The rock's behavior is basically it follows Newton's laws of motion and gravity, and then it participates in awareness, and because it has beliefs. The rock has beliefs about what it's trying to do. The rock's beliefs are really simple. The content in its awareness is really dumb. It's there's not much going on. But yeah, sure, there's some kind of content, I guess, in awareness. Probably. We'll never know because you can't talk to it because it's so dumb. But and so what is the content in awareness? It turns out the content in awareness is totally almost what else could it be? The content in awareness is homomorphic to your internal dynamics, or the internal dynamics of the object. So your qualia of vision, just by coincidence, happen to correspond exactly to the way that your retina and LGN and visual cortex decode incoming visual signals. No, it's that's that motion in the quantum field, the excitations of that in this big awareness field, that's the motion in the awareness field too. Now, exactly like there's some sort of like transform that's happening that I don't quite follow because it's clearly not anything close to one-to-one. Like how the content, exactly how the content and awareness maps to the content, like the objective content inside is like a little bit unclear, but it's just like, if you read the essay, like how the algorithm feels from the inside or things like that, like it's literally like the content in your awareness, the things that are arising are computed by something. They're not magically appearing from nowhere. Every sensation, every thought, everything that happens inside you in your subjective experience is a reflection of some dynamic inside of you. And if you have a periodic dynamic inside of you, you have a periodic experience. If you have a linear dynamic inside of you, you have a linear experience. Like it's homomorphic in a sense. Like it's not just like mapping, but it has some sort of shared structural map. And like, so if it acts as if it has subjective experience, because it has the internal dynamics required to produce the behaviors of a thing that has subjective experience, then we can meaningfully say it has subjective experience. And like, you could be tricked. I can make something that looks like it has the dynamics, but it doesn't really. Like this is just an inference. Like you have optical illusions. I can trick you into thinking that the duck cow thing or whatever. But like the fact you can be tricked about something doesn't mean that like you can't make reasonable inferences about it too.
Well, we're running out of time, so thank you so much for all your questions. I want to leave with one final question because you've talked about the importance of a bottom-up approach to alignment. I'm largely sold on that. That said, usually the best things in life tend to come from a combination of top-down and bottom-up. And so I'm going to put you on the spot here, but if there was one axiom so I have one that I love to go by, which is a loving act, and therefore a morally good act, is one that enables more choices for the other. So like empowers them to make better choices. Another axiom is good is like the best games are the ones where you try to keep the game going. So like the infinite game. So is there one axiom that if you had to, gun to your head, try and instill into the AIs that you are trying to grow? What would it be?
The way that can be named is not the true way. Truly, I really need them to see that you're going to hear a bunch of rules, you're going to learn a bunch of rules, you're going to have some models that really look like they work, and you're wrong. Like you've named it and it's not right. And like I'm not worried about whether they'll get lost. We're really good at training models on like text. I'm very certain we will train the models we build on lots of text. They'll know everything there is to know. They're going to know too much. Like what we're trying to get them to see is like there's a difference between hearing a story and living an experience, and living that experience. That's where the stories come from. It's like that's how you find out if your story is worth telling in the first place. And so like, yeah, I guess that's very much what I hope the guys can see.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Emmett.